Good morning. I have the pleasure of interviewing Toni Will, 25 years in leadership, manager, and governor of the Kalamazoo Wings hockey team. I'm sorry I jacked that one up. The first female GM of the Kalamazoo Wings. Toni launched her coaching business in Mindful Elevated in 21 and has helped people find freedom from substance abuse and reach fitness and nutrition goals. In 2024, Tony became a TEDx speaker and launched Women in a podcast that celebrates women in all walks of life. She is an author of a book, Not the Norm. She has earned two Guinness World Records with the Wings in 2019 for the largest lightsaber battle, and 2024 most waving foam fingers. Tony has completed two full Ironmans in 2014 and 2017. She's a mother and a wife. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I know it's 9 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time today. It's a little bit early, and I appreciate you being willing to jump on and have a pleasant conversation.
My pleasure. I'm a morning person, so this is my time to shine. Anytime after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm pretty worthless.
Outstanding. So, like when I reached out to you, I really wanted to hear your perspective as a general manager and being a high level woman in there and dealing with men that are not emotionally regulated and actually dealing with mental health issues. I would believe working in the hockey field with how many concussions people get, the high rates of actually travel, the possibly substance abuse because alcohol I know is huge in hockey, especially lower levels. Um, and not trying to throw shame at them, but actually figuring out ways to build bridges to help people. And have you been able to help implement any different, uh, I don't say rules, but ways of getting to these guys to actually start to heal?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first thing is, so I've been in my role at the Kalamazoo Wings now for 11 years. And over the course of those 11 years, I've had the opportunity to work with various coaching staff. Obviously, a lot of players have moved through the organization in 11 years. And I think it'll help your audience understand how our system works. So, I'm the general manager, as you did in the intro, of the hockey team. At our level of hockey, so there's 3 levels of our developmental league, and it's a system. So there's the NHL at the top, then there's the American Hockey League, and then there's our league, the ECHL. And so we develop players to move up and down this system in order for them and the coaching staff and the front office staff, because everyone kind of has these similar aspirations to go to what we call the show, which is the NHL. And so these, to your point, these are hard driving, hard working individuals at a young age, especially the players coming in and the staff that are very driven. And sometimes this comes at a cost. And so what we really work hard on is ensuring that we're taking care of everyone within the Kalamazoo Wings organization, regardless of their role, whether they're the GM like me or they're a player that is hungry to get to the NHL, and how do we ensure that everyone is taken care of at the highest level? So the type of leader I am is someone that has struggled with their own anxiety, has struggled with substances, and so I know what that's like. And I talk about it very openly. It'll be a part of my book. I just did a TEDx less than a year ago on these things. And so as someone who's lived it, I want to ensure that they have the same tools and resources and access to help that I did. And so for example, both our head coach and myself, we are both sober. We're both alcohol free. We have been for I'm coming up on 5 years here in a month, and he's not far behind me. One of our assistant coaches, he's also chosen to live a sober life. Our PR director and broadcaster, he is 11 years sober. So we really walk the walk in terms of showcasing, what it means to be at a higher level and have these roles where we're looked up to say, oh, they're living a clean lifestyle. That's pretty cool. And they talk about it publicly because it's so stigmatized. And then we offer them resources as well. We have life coaches available for our playing staff, and they have that access to talk to someone outside of the organization, because it's really hard to come to the GM or the head coach and say, "Hey, I'm struggling," even though they know like we're substance free, but they don't want to put their jobs in jeopardy. So we provide life coaches for them as well to ensure that they have those resources to get the help they need.
That's impressive. I'm glad that you guys have the life coaches that are doing it. Have you, while you had been doing this for for 5 years sober, first off, congratulations. That's actually a huge feat. Living that lifestyle, it's easy to just tell people to do as I say, not as I do. And have you found it when a person's struggling, like, and then all of a sudden they start to be able to change as far as get away from alcohol or substances? Have you found it where they've been able to be more of a team player, been able to be more of a leader? And I'm pretty sure that it also impacts their relationships with obviously the front staff as well.
Oh, yeah. What happens is, especially if someone's struggling with any type of substance, and I want to fill in the blank on what substance can be. It doesn't just have to be drugs and alcohol. And I always like to point this out because alcohol gets separated out like it's its own little entity, but alcohol is a drug. So I like to point that out because I'm passionate about ensuring that people are fully educated, and big alcohol's done a good job of separating itself. And so I like to point that out because I'm passionate about it. The other thing too is these can be other substances. This could be porn addiction, gambling, caffeine, whatever. I mean, cannabis. It doesn't just have to be a drug per se. So, what we find is when people are working through this and are in a safe environment and have the support they need, and they're able to start to stack up time in terms of substance free days, whatever that substance is, fill in the blank. They build more confidence, and as they build more confidence and self trust, their self esteem rises. And then they become, to your point, a better leader. They become someone that is more empathetic because they're slowly overcoming the challenges that they face. And here's the thing, you said this at the top, and is very true. At minor league hockey levels, the travel is insane. They're not getting, trying to eat right, and we provide these things, but the sleep schedule, and they're on buses for hours and hours and hours. It is really hard. So how do you create a routine out of this? And so when you're able to stack up some time with the right support, you feel more confident. Now you've been through kind of the mud, you're able to be a better leader, not only in the front office, but the locker room as well.
Glad that you actually clarified substance. Right now, I'm like finishing up my bachelor's in human services with substance addictions, and I'm about to go for my master's in social work. And when people don't, they just say alcohol over here. You are right about that. Pharma has done a really good job over here. Cannabis is starting to come up here. Now here's everything else that's taboo. You said porn, sex, food addiction. It is what people are drawn to be able to cope with their urges or to be able to mask their feelings. And I appreciate you bringing up the sleep and the really the heavy impact on the load of actually going from place to place, because if you're not getting the right amount of sleep, you're messing that up. You're messing up your REM. You're messing the fact that you're working your ass off all night and then all of a sudden trying to go to bed. You want to be able to sleep. You're in a new town. You're excited. You're young. You're ready to go after it. They all have their own challenges. And to me, what I've been learning, especially in the field that I work in for the VA as a peer specialist right now, I've learned that pretty much the gateway drug to addiction is trauma. And when they're actually seeing these life coaches, are they also able to see therapists as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad you bring that up because I think that these can go in tandem, and that there's a team. And so I'll give you an example. So my mom passed away in February from Alzheimer's, and so I'm obsessed too with all things brain health, and how alcohol specific. affects the brain and all these things. And my mom's Alzheimer's was not related to over drinking or substance use or anything like that. It was just what she passed away from. But I was at a stage, and this was in the middle of hockey season, where, um, it's very stressful. We were not playing well, and I have an executive coach for the business side of my life, but I also reengaged in therapy because in my this and this is how I have a coaching business as well, not for ice hockey, but for lifestyle coaching to help other individuals reduce, remove substances, and then professional development coaching. But coaching is to look through the windshield. So, like future thinking, like, how do I want to be in the future? Therapy tends to be, let's look in the rearview mirror. Let's go all the way back to your point. Let's talk about the trauma. Let's talk. And so, to have those two things in tandem work really well together. So, a long answer to your short question, yes, they have access to mental health therapists as well.
So I discussed this with the viewers before. So I did a cognitive processing therapy for a residential program through the VA back in 2021. It was 13 weeks long, and it decoupled a lot of the emotions from the trauma. And I'm glad that you talked about how your coaching is going forward. A lot of times when you pass through that trauma, you already still have all these behaviors that have been set. And then when you have these behaviors set, you still want to go back to them. You have your relationships that's been like normal patterns. Like when you're trying to change as a human, you have these people like your mother, your brother, your family, your loved ones. They want to see you, unfortunately, they want to see you heal, but unfortunately, they're so used to you being in a certain way. And they kind of push you in a certain way, especially if it's an unhealthy relationship or they don't have high levels of empathy. And where coaching is able to have people to move forward. When you are coaching these young guys that want to go to the show, and you know that they're eager, but they're actually kind of stepping on themselves where they're not being able to move forward. Either it doesn't have to be substances, it could just be from anxiety, it could be from depression, it could be from trauma as a child. Is there anything that you specifically do or actually have like people in the leadership roles that could be able to help them get out of their own way so that they could be the best version of themselves?
Yeah, so I think it's good to delineate. When I coach individuals, I don't coach any of the hockey players because that's separate from
Hmm.
the work I do. Um, so I can't really speak to that point because I don't coach them. The coaches that we hire, they're the ones that they do step beyond just substances into it could be, anxiety, it could be depression, it could be, who anger issues, you can I mean, hockey is an aggressive game, so you can see those type of things come out. So as far as, like, what tactics and strategies and what they're doing, I couldn't answer that, but I can say that they're equipped because, of regardless if they're hockey players or not, there are things that just individuals struggle with too, just human beings in general. So that I think there's some commonalities with what you see with hockey players because of they're professional hockey players. This is their living. And they are a lot of them are married and they have children. Like, this isn't, at the juniors level where they're much younger. I mean, these are generally men that have families too. So they're juggling a lot. And, so I couldn't speak necessarily to how they go about it, but I know that it is all addressed, especially if they're willing. I think the biggest message here is being willing to speak up because I think a lot of people, especially men, I think it's very stigmatized for men to go and ask for help. I think it's harder for men because of a lot of reasons, right? Like, what if I ask for help? I'm not going to seem as manly. And really how men were raised, depending on how they were raised in their household, like boys don't cry or all this crap that's just not true, or but we are brought up in a way sometimes depending on who our parents were and what their beliefs were. And I think it's hard for men in general to stand up and say, I need help.
So you brought up a good point about how it's been stigmatized, it's been a culture, it's been people want to say it's toxic masculinity, but the years and generations of men where they've been stuck, where they're doing what they need to do to survive, and now we're living in such a plush life compared to what we were 100 years ago. And we have a lot more time to be able to grow and go through all that complexity. What have you been able to see in your life, either from your coaching or from being a mother, of helping individuals be able to grow into a full human and being able to have that spectrum of emotions?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about me specifically as, I have a lot of different identities. I mean, and uh, every human being does, but me specifically, um, as a woman leader in a men's professional sport, and because I'm a mother, I have, and women are, by research shows, women tend to be more effective leaders, even though we are about 6% of the C-suite in all of business. And it is because of the fact that most of us are women who've had children. And when you have had children, you have a higher level of empathy. And you're also able to um, carry multiple tasks and execute at a higher level because you're used to having to get the kids off to A, B, and C while working, and manage a household, that whatever that definition of work is. Because if you choose to stay home and raise your children and be a homemaker, that's still a job too. I mean, it's so there's a lot to be said for women in leadership and our empathy level, because of a lot of us are moms, and a lot of us were athletes growing up too, which is, there's a lot of statistics to show that girls and young women who played sports tend to take on leadership roles later in life because they've built up that confidence playing a sport.
Angela Duckworth, she talks about grit in the book and how she studied people at West Points, and the ones that were more successful at that were grittier, and they measured off of, did they play sports? Did they do any other extracurricular activities? Where did they work alongside of it? Did they be able to show that type of resilience? So I do understand exactly where you're coming about, where being a mother and raising and doing a lot of these traditional duties that have been passed down through generations. But do you ever actually find the conflicting views of, like, transitioning it from the feminine level of empathy to the masculine level of empathy and being able to help them build a bridge? And have you been able to find, like, I don't wanna say a, "Here, just type in A, B, and C, the formula," but have you been able to help transition that empathy into men so that they're able to be more understanding from your level?
Yeah, and I coach men too, my clients who are working to get out. So I coach men and women, and um, we talk we talk about empathy, feelings, emotions. My clients bring me where they're at in their life, right? So, um, what I tend to see is individuals that my clients tend to be very high achieving. They're lawyers, they're doctors. And I mean, I'll coach really anyone, but that's who tends to gravitate towards someone like me. They're people, and Angela Duckworth's book Grit is excellent. I've read it, and her TED talk on it is excellent. But there are individuals that tend to have a lot of grit. Where I see them get hung up is the stigma of, they've taken the step to hire a coach and or go to therapy or both, which is huge, but they're battling the stigma to take it outside of those individuals, even to their own significant others, because it feels like the man card is not, like, it's just whatever they were raised culturally to believe about what it means to be a man, and it's really hard, and if you couple their professions in with it too, it, can feel more challenging. And I see, regardless of gender, regardless of what they do for a living, I see that the number one reason people get stuck is they don't talk about these things outside of the smallest circle possible. And so one of my ways, and this is a lot of Brené Brown's work that I think is very influential, is let's reduce the shame by being more vulnerable and a willingness to talk about what we struggle with. And it doesn't have to be on a podcast, right? I just happen to be very high courage And I feel like if I tell my story, people can relate to that. I wanna help other people. And, clearly, Will, you probably feel the same way since this is your podcast and you wanna normalize men's mental health. But it's a hard topic to talk about, and I we're getting with each generation, we're seeing more and more empathy. And that's why I spend a lot of time breaking down barriers for the generations behind me, because they are more empathetic than my generation, which is Gen X. But the millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they have they're more open minded to these things, and so that's where it's just like I have some silver bullets when I'm working with clients. One of them is talking about it and telling people, and the second one is community. Find a community of people, of like-minded people with similar goals.
So when you mentioned Brene Brown, one of the biggest parts that she talks about is that I look for vulnerability in other people before I look for it myself. And you cannot have courage without vulnerability. And so, like I said before, I'm a former Marine. Actually, I didn't tell you that, but I'm a former Marine, and I've actually lost quite a few people to suicide. And the field that I love to explore because of how close I got there myself is how do we get to that final destination? And what was the gravitational pull into the center? And I've had a few buddies with me for my first tour in Iraq that land up completing. I lost a buddy of mine that never saw combat in completing. I've lost other people to suicide. And when I think about the communication and community, getting outside, like you said, that trusted circle, the it's hard for people. And this is why I'm using this platform to be able to help people realize it's okay to start to talk about things. And when you're more vulnerable with people, you're able to get closer and connect. And trying to get away from shaming our past people that were in front of us, because that is easy dopamine hits. See, I'm like this because of X, Y, and Z. But why what can I do today to be able to make myself a better person? What is the 1% growth? Or what is the incremental changes I can do? So I agree when you're saying that we have you being a millennial, being a Gen X, I'm being a millennial and alpha, and it's these people need role models. They need people to be able to break away, to be able to, I don't want to say shield them, but to give them courage to keep pushing forward.
100%. That's exactly it. And, one of the tools when you mentioned dopamine, one of the tools I like to use with my clients is called the dopamine diary. I love alliteration, so if I can put 2 it's easier to remember. So, but a dopamine diary essentially is being aware of what provides dopamine hits to each individual. So, and that because that's a feel good chemical, it's the learning chemical in the brain. But if we get too much of it, okay, and if it's stimulated artificially, as you know, because you're studying this, it can easily slide into addictive behaviors. And so, for instance, alcohol. Alcohol stimulates the reward center of the brain, and when you ingest it, it creates artificial levels of dopamine. So, for someone like me who loves to read a book, I love to read. I read my age every year. I'm 47 years old, so I'll read 47 books this year. But I love to read. But back when I was drinking, I was stimulating that reward center in my brain to the point where reading a book wasn't pleasurable because those levels of dopamine don't even get close to the artificial level that alcohol can provide. So when you remove the artificial hits and you realize where you get those dopamine spikes from exercise, watching something funny on TV. For me, I get dopamine hits from booking travel. Like I get excited about planning a trip with my husband, eating something really good, getting some good news. I mean, the list can be long. It could be it could be so many different things, but people aren't really aware where they get these dopamine spikes that are normal, healthy, and not artificial, instead of seeking out ways to get dopamine hits from other places that are not healthy or can turn into something not healthy.
So when I think about alcohol, for instance, I grew up in a Canadian and Irish family predominantly. I have a few other things in me, but If you're happy, you drink. If you're sad, you drink. If you're bored, you drink. If you wanna have fun, you drink. And you start actually adding all these different dopamine layers, and it starts to tie into your behaviors and patterns. For instance, when my Uncle Randy passed, we had 6 people carrying him, and then we had 2 people behind him carrying a cooler up to the grave. And it became such a normal thing. Being in the Marine Corps, we were founded in a tavern November 10th, 1775. So what we do on the Marine Corps birthday, we drink. We have a huge, huge party. And the, the an issue with alcohol is actually we start using it as an avoidance technique. And just like how you mentioned reading, and honestly, kudos to you. 47 books in 1 year, that's roughly about a book a week. So kudos to you. And it's interesting when we sit down and we put these words in our face, are we doing it intentionally? Because when we are doing it just to hide away from the loud noises or try to de-stress, like we're not able to be able to understand what's coming on. Like you said, working out is a huge way. Also helps out with the serotonin release. And we start to get very addicted to dopamine, especially low ends of dopamine, of watching the hyperarousal. We see the news, or we see Facebook, or we do the 30-second to 60-second reels. Most of the time, after an hour of scrolling, you have no idea what you're doing. But so, as a person like yourself, that's why I'm curious about, like, have you, and I know I keep going back to men, but it was just a transitioning of, because women have been doing this a lot better, of being more emotionally about being able to express it. Like, have you been able to, again, like I said, trying to go back and teach these guys to be able to build a bridge? Because one of the stuck points, and the reason I'm asking this is we say, hey, guys, figure it out. Well, a lot of people just say, "Well, I'm not gonna spend the time trying to figure it out. Are you going to shame me? I'm not gonna talk to you." How do we help build a bridge so we get them where they be the best version of themselves?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Women are, um, we're more hardwired for community. We're more because we lead with our emotions more. Women seek out connection. We seek out those communities, those groups. We like to talk. A lot of women do, and not everyone, because I don't want to overgeneralize. So when I think about men and how we help them in that space. A lot of these men are in relationships. It doesn't have to be a partnership. It could be a relationship with their mother, with their sister, with a friend that happens to be a woman. This would be my recommendation for one of the first places you go to, because that where you have a close relationship with another female is where you can really start to feel safe in expressing those emotions. Right, so you start there, and then as they feel that safety, it's, "All right, well, what resources?" And maybe it's something as simple as, getting a coach or a therapist or both that are female, because they can help tap into that.
So growing up in a lower socioeconomic, my mother did not feel safe to be able to express my emotions, nor my sister. And a lot of times growing up that way is very, very difficult. I've actually sat in front of many female therapists for especially when I came back from the Marine Corps, and I felt like I couldn't relate to them.
Mm.
So I know it's we could say, "Hey, sit across from them," but having the courage, because this is something that is not really spoke about much, where if I share my vulnerable side, will this woman think less of me? And it's easy to say, "Oh, that's your ego. Get over your ego." But having the courage to be able to show ourselves, because even very primitively, men will actually go like this. We'll nod our head down when we say hi to somebody that we don't know. We'll raise our head up when we do know them. But this whole thing of guys being able to show themselves, especially to a female, which is extremely difficult. And that's why I was asking him. Like, I know it could sound like, hey, talk to your mother or talk to your sister. But what about the individuals that have been generationally stuck?
Yeah, I mean, this can be too where and I don't know how much studying you've done on epigenetics, but really, there's you go back a couple generations and there's a lot to be learned about our familial experiences and what we can learn about past generations, and sometimes a lot of times they've already passed on, but finding out what traumas they suffered because then they run through generations to say our generation as we're growing up. I don't know that there's a clear-cut answer because it really depends on the individual and their level of trust and then what traumas they have experienced, and if there is trauma specific to a woman, right? Because that's inherently, if you're sitting in front of another female and you're not feeling comfortable opening up, well, that could be a whole other piece of trauma that's been experienced. I've had trauma as it relates to men. Do I seek out, d it my doctor, he's male, but I still trust him, but, I don't know, so I think I don't know that there's a one size fits all. I think it depends on those experiences, but I do think tracing it back in epigenetics is helpful to start to understand the why, not only our own traumas, but past traumas for our family members.
So speaking about that, the past traumas, like, and this is something I've discussed with people. And my dad was a Vietnam vet, and my grandfather was a World War II vet. My great grandfather was a World War I vet. My father, when he passed on, right before he passed on, he was a very good man, but he also lost a lot of his ability to get out of his own way. He was stuck in his own body for a long time. He was disabled. But when he was younger, he would come in the middle of the night and start beating on us when he was drunk, crush my brother. And it used to hurt. And it creates this whole other situation. It's easy to say, oh, you should have got help back then. And this is where I'm trying to get to men where to have that courage to break that generational trauma curse and to be able to say, hey, my World War II vet, my grandfather, not being able to talk. Hey, you know what? The fastest way to get somebody to comply is give them a hand whooping, and then all of a sudden move on. And same deal with World War II, World War One vet, and now trying to slow down and take that time to be able to converse, to be able to articulate your emotions, to be empathetic, to understand what a person's doing. Because if you don't know how to articulate your emotions, we're kind of stuck. We're stuck in this very fragmented world because this works over here, but this doesn't work over here. How do we actually be able to communicate? And I don't think you have one size that fits everybody, but different tools. Like you said, talk to your mom and talk to your sister, or talk to a relationship of another person, or even test. And what I was getting from was like have testing it with a female therapist because they're there to try to help you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think too there's lots of other tools, especially if you're not able to get it starts with self, right? With where first off, all these traumas that you've mentioned, they're not our fault at all, but it is our responsibility. And I think of that as a mantra or a North Star in a sense. Like it wasn't my fault I got addicted to alcohol because alcohol is an addictive substance. But it is my responsibility if I want to change. Because the only thing we have control over one thing in this world, and it's ourselves. That's it. So, some tools to start with self and what we can control. Journaling is a big one. And it doesn't have to be this dear diary and you're writing pages and pages and pages. I do a gratitude journal every night. It takes me, I don't know, less than a minute. I write 3 wins that I had for the day, and then I write 3 wants that I have for tomorrow. Meditation is another tool. And I always this one always gets a little pushback. Number 1, it's not woo woo. And number 2, it's not, there's no right or wrong way to do it. And there's so many tools out there. Meditation is all just about stopping and slowing the brain down. That's it. It doesn't mean you can't have thoughts. You can't control the thoughts. We have 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts per day. They're going to happen. And the other thing I like to point out is thoughts are just thoughts. They're not directives. It does our thoughts, 90% of them, 95% of them aren't true. They're just thoughts. And so being able to start with the things that we can do ourselves first is really important, and they can be really simple, highly accessible tools that are not expensive to help us start to sift through before we even take the step of talking to someone. But what I would say is this: whatever is going on, these thoughts, because most of them aren't true, it gets to that point where they become all consuming, especially when we talk about areas of suicide or substance abuse, or you're just not, if you start finding yourself Googling, am I an alcoholic, or am I suicidal, or am I, that is a flag to say, okay, I need to take this outside of me and talk to someone.
You nailed it when you were saying about sitting with your own thoughts. And meditation is not woo-woo at all. It's very similar to praying. It's you're collecting your thoughts. Acceptance commitment theory has a huge component of all about this, being able to understand that you're not your thoughts, not your emotions. They're a part of you, but you are more than them. The journaling, I've actually recommended it to many people where, especially if you're having a very chaotic day, just scribble. You don't have to have sentence structure. You could just go. And three things you're grateful for. The want is something I'm going to take away from this conversation because how many times do we actually say, this is what I want to do? Or do we always say need over it? But what do we want to do? Who are we in the future? And I appreciate that because obviously you being a coach, it's or doing the coaching, I should say, helping people out with freedom and substances and fitness and nutrition. If you don't have, you probably use SMART goals and motivational interviewing to get them to have a clear, concise language and be able to explain it their own way. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna take that away from it. I believe that's all very, very heavily important for people to succeed.
Yeah, another tool that people can use to help understand themselves better, and I do this on, and anyone can do this, but there's an assessment called Strength Finders. It's through Gallup. It's $50. It's worth the spend, because it'll, and I don't know if you've taken it before, you know your strengths. Head nod yes. Okay, this is like a classic Navy suit. It never goes out of style. So if you can understand what your strengths are and be able to label them and verbalize them, it can help you as you navigate through these challenges through life. And then you'll give your whole list. There's 33. It's not about improving the items at the bottom. It's really just saying, this is how I'm hardwired. My top 5 strengths. How can I continue to activate these and help me get to where I want to be? Because we tend to have a lot of individuals tend to have a lot of negative self-talk, what I call the inner narrator, and most of it's bullshit. So it's like, okay, how can I continue to focus on how I what's good in me and lean into that as opposed to what's wrong with me? And I'm using air quotes because we label things as good and bad and right and wrong. What if it just is? And that Strength Finders really does help.
So unfortunately, I do not remember mine. I did it through the VA and they do one coaching with it, and I agree with it. You'll be able to rely on it, be able to move forward, able to understand and analyze the lens that you're looking through the world through. And
Exactly. And you can use it both personally and professionally. And I started, my dad was an executive coach, so I was taking these type of personality assessments when I was starting at 13 years old. So I could really understand who I was. And like, listen, I'm a middle-aged, quirky white woman from Kalamazoo, Michigan, like, and embracing that. I'm not trying, I encourage people to just be authentically themselves. And everyone has like issues. Everyone has problems. Everyone has struggles. And recognizing that if there are things that, what do we feed our brain, right? Are we feeding our brain the shit on social media that is like fake? Or are we feeding it with a good book that is in line with our own core values? Do we know our core values? Like, go Google some of like core value stuff you can find and start to understand who you are, because the more you understand who you are and you use these very accessible tools, it'll help build confidence. It'll help feel more, the self-worth increases. So there's a lot out there, and a book that I really like to recommend is called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. and I don't know if you've read it or not, but I it's an excellent book, and it goes back to what I was saying. We put labels on things. I'm a bad person because I have these bad thoughts, and I've been through these very bad traumatic situations. But what if it just is? We get in our own way, and this book really helps through the most trauma I mean, I encourage people to listen to the book, don't read it, because it can be really get it on Audible, because it's coaching and conversational. If you try to read it, it's hard. It's just harder to I don't know if comprehend's the right word, but it's about being being able to make peace with what actually is and not the stories we build around these experiences.
That's that's beautiful. I'm actually gonna check this book out. I'll check out the YouTube video while you was talking about it, I pulled it up. Because I know quite a few people I work with, we have moral injuries, and then we also create these narratives, self-narrative loops of what could I have done? Why did this happen? Am I a bad person because I did this? And then all of a sudden trying to understand that the past is the past and we can't change it. It's more of an acceptance from what I'm hearing and being able to, I don't say just strip away the emotion, but strip away from the need for control and trying to change the narrative.
100%. We put a lot of blame on ourselves. There's guilt and there's, like these are normal emotions. We are meant to feel all the emotions as human beings. We're meant to be sad, we're meant to be happy, we're meant to be but we're always just striving for this elusive happy. And then we think it's some destination we're getting to and then like poof, we're there. And no, that's not how life works. And if we can really start to accept like what is and not build stories around it. And a lot of these stories stems from automatic negative thoughts, which are ants. From Daniel Amen did this study, and there's all kinds of things we do, like fortune telling and storytelling, and there's 9 of them, blaming, all these things. And so, like connecting these dots again to recognize that we can't change a lot of this stuff, but we can accept it for what it is.
Hmm, that's beautifully said, the acceptance of it. Like, when you talk about the morals and you were talking about the values, I was thinking about how we use that in substance abuse, where we ask people, does your morals align from your values? And asking people to really can understand how does it actually push back? What does are your morals aligning with your values or your values aligning with your morals? And is this substance are going to actually align with where you want to go? And then on top of it, what are you masking? Also, you have actually mentioned this Kalamazoo, and I want to apologize. I saw the extra A after the L, and I'm like, why did you guys put the A in there? It totally jacked me up. But so I wanted to and I'm like, I feel so bad about that because I'm like, I don't like to do that, but no, and I really do appreciate your insight, the acceptance of it, the acceptance of change, the acceptance of who you were, the acceptance of that limited mindset, that acceptance of that person that did this to you, the acceptance, and it's not saying that you don't have control in the future, but accepting where you were. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It really steps back to, there's some Buddhist philosophies that I really resonate with. And I'm not Buddhist, but I think you can take pieces and parts of all beliefs, spiritualities, religions, and learn from it. But this respond over react. And when we're in situations, understanding how to handle them, and if you tend, generally speaking, those of us who've struggled with substances, we tend to be more reactionary. And so, how do we be more responsive, more intentional instead of impulsive? And so, looking at these things and using some of these tools when we're in situations where we're upset. And if we're upset and we want to go to self soothe, well, how do I respond instead of react? How do I be more intentional? What can I do to uh, get my nervous system back in check? To get my prefrontal cortex back on in line. And these are some of the things I do. Like I just write down respond, don't react, and I underline it when I'm in a situation where I could be really frustrated. Because you start to as you start to look at the body and how it responds in certain situations, traumatic or non, it's helpful. It builds confidence when you can start to connect all these dots with all these different tools, and thinking patterns that we've been talking about today.
Do appreciate that. And I wanted to ask, what is a message that you would give out to any of the listeners? So half the listeners are female, half the listeners are men, and women are way better at investigating. I meant to actually just, and I was very curious about just putting this out there. And this is probably going to be the 37th episode probably going to be releasing, roughly. And I was very fascinated by who the viewers were. And I thought it was just really trying to help out men, but then I realized I was also helping out women understand men. What are some words of wisdom that you would like to hear from men to hear? And then also from the woman's perspective of what women need to hear about that whole change and like guys changing or boys changing and changing ideologies.
Yeah, I think, for the men listening, and I always like to say this, like, if you all listen to my TEDx, you're gonna hear me talk about, my gender playing a role in what I do for my day job because I am a minority in my role. But I always like to say I'm not bashing men, I love them, I've been married to 3 men, and, 3rd time's the charm, I got it right this 3rd time. What I would encourage the men to consider is their mindset. Would they have a growth mindset, or do they have a fixed mindset? And I think this is something to really go internal and reflect on. And a fixed mindset is this is the way it is. This is how I'm thinking, that my way is right, as opposed to a growth mindset where I'm willing to consider other ways of thinking, other opinions, other methodologies, other ideologies. And if you can start there, that's going to help you understand how you're at. And if you're in a fixed mindset and you're like, gosh, I might be, that's okay. You can change that. This goes into neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity is in the brain and how our brain has these neurons that connect. We can learn new things and create new habits and new patterns at any age. So to really ask yourself these questions, and then for the women, for women, it is depending on how they feel, whatever the situation is in their lives. Having that curiosity mindset, asking a lot of questions, and doing so in a way that is, loving and is, not putting someone on the defensive. I'm a very curious person. I like to ask questions. I like to get to know people and not being afraid to be curious and ask questions. People like to talk about themselves. So be curious. And I think when you bring that curiosity with a growth mindset and regardless of gender, you're gonna find a winning combination.
Oh, I totally agree. When you started talking about fixed mindset and growth mindset, it really brought me back to Dr. Carol Dweck. And the other thing where you were talking about taking the initiative and learning from other people, and this is something that I wanted to ask you to come on. You're actually the first woman I interviewed, besides the group that I just did. The They were talking about in the book decoding human interconnection, the chemistry of decoding human interconnection. And they were saying that when men teach men, a white male teaches a white male, the white male will pick it up quick. If a white male teaches a black male after they get past the racial differences, the black male will move a lot further than the white male. When a white man teaches a white female, and it can go inverse, it can go in different orders. When they get past the sexual differences, the white female is going to outperform the white male. And then it gets even more when the white male teaches the black female and how they're able to get even further because they're looking at it from a multitude of different narrations. And when they're able to understand that we get past the sexual differences, we get past the racial biases, then we're able to grow. So I just wanted to throw that in there because when you were sharing about having that type of dialogue, I think it's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you might read as many books as I do, Will. I don't know. You have a lot of knowledge. I think you read more than you're giving yourself credit for.
Oh, I never said I don't read. Like right now, I'm actually working full time. I'm taking 17 credits this semester. I'm doing this podcast. Back in 22, I think I read about 70 something books. I would work out and I'll just listen to audiobooks. Most of the books I listen to are nonfiction. I'm trying to understand how did I get stuck in my type of loop up until a certain point? How did I get to having a barrel underneath my chin? And how can I re-spin it out and trying to find out the formula to help out other people? So I feel like talking to individuals and having the ability to not to agitate the person, but to agitate the listener of, is my thinking true? Is my
Mhm.
thinking true right now? And agitate them enough to maybe cause them to be discomfort while they're listening, to want to have that change or want to have that dialogue, not to cause pain or to hurt them, but to actually meet them with love and watch them grow. Because I've lost, like I said, I've lost too many people to, I know, to suicide. Have had too many friends get down the addiction path. I've had so many few people. I have actually screwed up so much of my life, and what I've been doing is what Carl Jung talks about. If you really love people, you be the best version of yourself for them. So that's why I read as much as I do, and that's why I care as much as I do for people. And I'm always curious when I'm asking questions. It's never to really come as an aggression. I'm a perpetual student.
Yeah, lifelong learner, and that is going it's serving you well. And the fact that you're willing to talk about, topics that are not easy, including suicide, I think people are afraid to talk about it because then, that's stigmatized, and to be able to help and say, "No, I've been there, and I wanna help other people understand before they do something like take their own lives." So, I applaud you for that.
I appreciate that, and it's a blessing and a curse because you can actually hear the person's voice inflection change, the rate of speech change. The individual is not baseline anymore, and talking with them on the veteran crisis line or the crisis lines, or even actually talking with them to other people and giving them the courage. Yeah, it's my little buddy.
He's so
Uh,
cute. What's his name?
Zeno is named after a pre-Socratic philosopher. And I've had the opportunity of actually calling a crisis line with a few people because this is something that we don't really talk about too much, but and I really believe that QPRs most people should learn about, or assist or psych armor. But if you are not well and you know that suicide is even on the table remotely, even at 1%, call the crisis line before time. Get familiar with it. Because when you get to that point, it's hard to go call a stranger up and say, "Hey, I need love. I need empathy. I need somebody to help me out." And scared shitless. So I do this because I genuinely want to be the change in the world I want to see.
Yeah, same. That's why I do my work, and I just applaud your service to our country and the work that you're doing, and it's been an honor to be one of the first women you've interviewed too.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Tony. And honestly, you have such a powerful story. And you're more than just being a Guinness Book of World Record. A mother, I think, is actually the most important job on earth. You're the only people to bring life into the world. And without you, we wouldn't have the population. Being a female entrepreneur, being a individual that's breaking ground, helping people see things from a different narration. I really do appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.